Joining us for OpenLine tonight, we are talking about the new HBO Max docuseries about a local church called Remnant Fellowship and the late leader Gwen Shamblin. News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter Phil Williams has done extensive reporting on Shamblin starting many decades ago, 2 decades ago, and then most recently with the crash that happened in May that took her life as well as her husband and 5 members of the church.
Absolutely. And, we were talking off air, and, I kept, all of my files from these investigations dating back to 2000, because we had the death of the young boy, 8-year-old Joseph, in 2003, 2004, and it was always in the back of my mind that something else tragic could happen. Never imagining that it would be a plane crash that kills 7 Remnant leaders.
And right now we don't know what caused it. The NTSB usually takes about a year to release their report as to the cause of the plane going down, but her husband Joe was piloting. We do know that much.
Right, and all of the available evidence right now points toward pilot error, and so that's my working theory at the moment.
Went down in Percy Priest Lake, so they didn't make it very far at all. Let's we've had a great caller call in. Lindsay's called in and decided to spend the rest of her hour with us. Lindsay, thank you for doing that. A former member of Remnant Fellowship, and Lindsay, I wanted to ask you and also Phil about Phil, your reporting started with taking a look at the financial situation of Remnant Fellowship, and then it developed after Joseph's death, looking at some of the other teachings of Gwen as far as discipline of children. No psychiatric medicines should be taken, things like that. I wonder, Lindsay, if you would chime in about some of the teachings that you now look back and say, that was really bizarre.
Absolutely. So on the not taking psychiatric medication, I grew up desperately needing some kind of, therapy, psychology, psychiatry, regardless of what you call it. Remnant Fellowship did not believe in pediatric mental health at all. I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I now take a pill every day that lets me do my job, that lets me take care of myself and do all the things I need to do to be a functional person. And I was told as a child, you're lazy, you're sinning, you're not being the best version of you that God wants you to be. I also grew up suffering with depression and anxiety, and I know numerous people who came to the church, even just came to the way down classes that my mom hosted, and would stop taking their antidepressants. And some people left because they would come a week later after not taking their antidepressants. They'd be horrible, they'd be suicidal, they'd be anxious, they'd be flying off the wagon, and they realize they need their medication. And there's numerous stories even online at spiritwatch.com and other websites that have stories of people who stopped taking their medication and continued to take it in secret so that they could continue on with the Remnant Fellowship program and not spiral out of control.
And Phil, you profiled a couple who talked about this.
That's right. Terry and David Phillips. Terry Phillips is in the docuseries on HBO Max. And again, it was exactly what Lindsay was describing. Terry Phillips described, being encouraged by Remnant leaders to get off of her psychiatric medication that provided her with stability. And again, all the science tells us, frequently psychiatric issues are medical issues. It's not just a spirit issue.
And unfortunately, it goes much farther than that. Remnant Fellowship does not believe in things like autism and other disorders of that kind. So, if you have a learning disability and you're in Remnant Fellowship, you're pretty screwed. They're going to give you the extra attention you need, being homeschooled and things like that, and you can get through. But if you actually have something like autism, they will tell you, God cured autism in my child, and they no longer have that. But what usually happens in those situations is a pattern of domestic abuse that will lead to the ability for them to code switch and mask and appear normal. But it's very clear when they become semi-functional adults that they still have autism, and we're not nurtured in the way that they should have been.
Are all children homeschooled in Remnant Fellowship?
It is not. It's a complicated question. At this point, the vast majority are. I grew up homeschooled before Remnant Fellowship kind of brought that in, but as there started to be more problems with teenagers kind of butting heads in the public schools in Brentwood, almost all of the leaders pulled their children out of school. It actually happened around the time of the Obama administration. A lot of leaders were talking about how Hillary Clinton and the Obamas were going to make it illegal to discipline your children, and they did not want that right taken away from them. And so they were taking their kids out of school specifically to protect the way that they were raising their children, to not have so many prying eyes. Actually, when Joseph Smith was initially sent to prison, they instructed every single family in Remnant Fellowship, if there is a family emergency, do not call 911, because Child Protective Services will come when you call that. If you need medical services, call the ambulance, because you don't need anyone investigating your home who shouldn't be there.
And I'm curious because I have heard, and I want us to be very careful not to use any names, but talking about the psychiatric issues. Have there been suicides within Remnant young people?
I can't testify to any suicides I personally know of. Okay. I do know things like self-harm, eating disorders, other things like schizophrenia, drug abuse, those things, sex addiction, teen pregnancy, all the issues that exist in the rest of the world exist in Remnant Fellowship, but they exist in a vacuum of abuse and a place with absolutely no resources. So I personally, the only thing that kept me from killing myself when I was in 10th grade was I watched the Ellen DeGeneres sitcom on YouTube, and we were told there's no such thing as being a happy person and being in sin. And at that time, Ellen DeGeneres was the happiest person I had ever seen.
Yeah.
And she was a devout homosexual. So I drew my own conclusions.
There you go. Okay, we have to take another quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to Lindsay and Phil about where things stand right now, as you know, with Remnant Fellowship. Stay with us.
Hey, Lindsay, can you hear me?